What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Early Edge. I am the Counselor of Cash, and we've got a pretty interesting setup. We've got 2 games yesterday, we got 2 wildcard games today, and we've got 2 tomorrow, so we'll have programming for you all the way through. Let's talk about what we did yesterday before we bring on the stars of the show. Oh, this is a nice recap screen. Looks like 8-2 overall. We've got a teaser pending from RJ White, just as an FYI there, but a really good day. I lost my Browns money line bet. CJ Stroud over 33.5 pass attempts was another loss, but everybody else has check marks. Absolutely love that. Thank you for being in the chat, by the way. Everybody's super active. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Large Numa says Sia for president. I accept that nomination. All right, let's talk about our scheduling coming up because, again, we've got 2 wildcard games tomorrow. We've got the 10 a.m. Early Edge. Well, that's here for you, just like it is every other day. And then we've got our NFL wildcard kickoff show. Instead of it being on prime time, it's at 3:30 because we have the 2 games now. Bills, Steelers obviously got moved. So we'll be talking about that game. And then, of course, we'll be talking about the night game there, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hosting the Philadelphia Eagles. All right. That's enough from me, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be a wild night. We've got 2 shootout. I think they're going to be shootouts. I think they're going to be exciting games, maybe some upsets in the works. And let's bring on the stars of the show to talk about that very thing. We've got the maestro. We've got Mike McClure. Before we get started and look at these odds, powered as always by BetMGM, Maestro, I got to ask you, I looked at that recap screen. It looked really good. Are we as confident today as we should have been yesterday?
One thing I'm confident in, guys, is that we're going to get 2 better games today than we did yesterday. I mean, both games sort of competitive into the third quarter, and then it got away from the Cleveland Browns and the Miami Dolphins. I think today is the best day of wildcard weekend, no question about it. We have 2 high-scoring games, 2 competitive, close games, I believe competitive games, and can't wait to get into it. And we also have a very clean and active list. For the first game, everybody is in.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. The clean and active list at this point in the season. You know, some teams are blessed with good injury luck and some teams aren't. Like Miami yesterday. They probably could have won that game if they had at least some semblance of a defense, but they didn't. And that's why Mike McClure was all over Kansas City. He said, play that up to 6.5 because that's what his simulations say. Mike, I know you have some confidence in this first game we're going to talk about, but listen, before I get to you on that, can I just share a bad beat? Well, it's not even a bad beat, but just a story from yesterday. So I had the Cleveland Browns money line. That's certainly not a bad beat. They got absolutely worked. But another bet I recommended on the show and that I gave out on a different show was the Browns over 23.5 points. They had 14 points with 12 minutes left in the second quarter, 0 points for the balance of the 42 minutes. That did not feel very good at all. So sorry, that's my bad beat story. Thank you for indulging me, everybody. But Mike McClure, let me ask you this, because let's get started with the Packers at the Cowboys. And I actually want you to lead the charge, and then I'll give my official pick, and then, Larry, you can give yours. But this is an interesting one. This opened at 7.5 over at BetMGM. It's now down to 7. We've got a 51-point total. I think we can all understand where the total is. The line seems pretty aggressive here in terms of a full touchdown. We know the Cowboys are great at home, but tell me why you might like the Packers here.
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons, but starting with the injury report, I think it's fantastic on the Green Bay side. We'll see how healthy Christian Watson really is, how much he plays, but his presence alone certainly helps. Then you have both the tight ends in. They've got 5 healthy wide receivers, though, so I love what they've got offensively. And then defensively, I think these teams are almost the same when you look at them honestly. I honestly don't think Dallas is a top half of the league defense. I think this is a spot where Green Bay is going to be able to move the football. Aaron Jones looks like one of the best running backs in football since returning. I think he's going to have a heavy workload here. I like the Green Bay side. I made the game 6 early in the week. Now with the injury report with Jair Alexander in, Watson in, both tight ends active and healthy, that number is down to 5.5 in the computer. I firmly believe this thing should be closing 6.5. I don't think we're going to see the market react that strong in the next hour for that, but I do think it should be a 6.5, not a 7 at this point.
All right, so Mike's official pick is the Packers plus the 7. I certainly lean that way, especially knowing the injury report. And I do think Aaron Jones is going to have a great game, but I think Jordan Love's going to complete a lot of passes. And so let's get to my official play here. And by the way, we're going to do this for each of the 2 games. We'll give our official plays. We'll answer some questions in the chat. And then, of course, we'll give out our gems for each game as well. But I like Jordan Love over 22.5. pass completions. You know, I really like this prop throughout the year. I've been hitting it here and there. Here's the thing. He's hit this in 5 out of the last 6 games. And that's pretty telling because in some of those games, he didn't necessarily have a negative game script. So when even in neutral game scripts, this Green Bay Packers team, they're passing the ball around quite a bit, and it's specifically in the short area. So here's the thing. If you think this is going to be a negative game script, then this is even an even better bet for you because he'll be throwing it potentially even more. But even in a neutral or slightly positive game script, I do think we're going to see Jordan Love pepper the bevy of receivers he has. We know Christian Watson is back. He's a field stretcher more than anything else, but Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, I mean, there's so many guys. He's got his tight ends back. He's got Luke Musgrave back along with Kraft. There's so many guys he can pepper with targets. And again, he's hit this in 5 out of his last 6 games. I just think this is too low a number. Now, when I put it on a sports line, the juice was pretty high. It's probably kicked up to 23.5 in some places. I still like it there as long as we're talking like minus 105, minus 110, maybe even plus 100. But I don't like it at heavy juice at 23.5 completions. So that's my official play. I think even if the Packers are competitive, they're still going to be passing the ball around. So again, even if it's not a negative game script, I like this play quite a bit. All right, Maestro, we got Mike McClure's official play. We've got my official play. We're going to give out Proppy's official play in this game in a little bit. But you've got 2 official plays. And what I love about one of them, and you can lead with whatever you want here, but one of them, the entire chat appears to agree with. So I love that.
Yeah, let's start with Jaden Reed. I got him over 47.5. I'm fine up to 49.5. Christian Watson is back. That is true, but that actually opens up space for Jaden Reed over the middle of the field, which is where you actually attack the Cowboys best because those, the corners on the outside, those guys are very, very good for the Cowboys, but the slot corner, not as good. Jaden Reed will see some time in the slot. He's led the team in targets the last 4 weeks, 7.5 targets per game. It's a rookie. The light came on at the end of the season, 280 yards over the last 4 games. I love everything Jaden Reed today, and I don't mind that Christian Watson is back. And you just see the confidence that he's playing with, and you see the confidence that Jordan Love has in him and the way he looks for him. I think we'll see that again today, regardless of the game script. And I'm on the Packers plus 7.5. I got it early in the week. It was on our Tuesday show. Still play it at 7. I don't think the Packers are going to slow down the Cowboys too much. I think both offenses are going to have their way. I think we're looking at 30-24, 30-27, something along those lines. Jordan Love, last 10 games, the number 3 quarterback in the NFL in terms of EPA. The Cowboys, we've seen them, dominate the bad offenses. But when you get a good offense, and Geno Smith went in there, and he did whatever he wanted for the Seahawks, I think the Cowboys are in for similar trouble because they rush the passer. We know how Micah Parsons gets after, but the Packers O-line, 3rd fewest sacks allowed. So I think they will hold up long enough. Jordan Love's mobility is also key, extending plays. And like Mikey said, he has all of his weapons available. Aaron Jones has 411 rushing yards since week 15. That leads the NFL. That's going to be a key. Obviously, the Cowboys have been weak on the ground, so they're going to try to stay balanced. Ultimately, I think it's going to be a big Jordan Love game. I was looking at his explosives. I was looking at going over his longest completion. I was looking at over his passing yards. I settled on Jaden Reed and the Packers, but I love all of those things for Green Bay today.
All right, and we had some comments in the chat I want to get to about the total. Larry, do you have any sort of take, whether it's a lean? Mike, I'm going to go to you on this one as well, because this total has kind of varied in certain places. It's 51 here at BetMGM, which I think is probably like the best number you're going to get if you want to take the over, but it looks like it's like 52.5 in some places. Larry, any take? I mean, it does seem like these offenses are going to, I don't think Dallas is really going to be able to establish the run as much as maybe Green Bay will, because the Tony Pollard experience just hasn't gone that well. With that said, I think both teams are going to end up passing the ball quite a bit.
Yeah, you look at the last 2 weeks and the Packers defense showed up against Justin Fields in Green Bay and against Jaren Hall. But before that, Tommy DeVito, Bryce Young, and Baker Mayfield absolutely dissected this Packers defense. So I think Dak and the Cowboys offense is going to have a huge day as well. I could only look over the total.
All right, Mike McClure, same question to you. What do your simulations tell you, or just your opinion outside of the simulations?
Yeah, so the computer wants to go under here. I am not trusting it. I'm not playing the under. I'm just on the Packers side here. But I have the number at 48, which is very close to where the market opened on this game. It was bet up pretty quickly. I think it's pretty understandable why it's been bet up. The reason for that, Green Bay has not been great defensively, especially in the secondary. Dallas really hasn't either. Some of the metrics, depending on the ones you look at, tell a good story. Others do not. I don't make Dallas a top half of the league defense personally. So that is why I'm not necessarily trusting it here. The only thing I will say, and the reason why I think Jordan Love is going to be great, especially when he's got weapons, we've seen it in a couple of games, most notably against Kansas City. Green Bay has the ability to shorten the game and do what Kansas City does. And that's why people hate watching Kansas City Chiefs games, because it's boring when Mahomes can execute a drive that lasts 7 minutes. I think that is something that definitely can happen here, the way Aaron Jones is running the football. I know they have the deep ball with Love and they want to continue to hit the big play. I think this is a scenario where they let Aaron Jones touch the football 20 to 25 times until they're able to stop him. So I think we see clock moving a lot here. So I'm not playing the total either way. Computer wants me to go under, keeping in mind 48.5 is still a very healthy total in an NFL game.
Yeah, Larry, go ahead.
If you look at last year's meeting, and I know both teams are markedly different, but Aaron Jones ran for 138, and that was the Christian Watson breakout game with 107 yards and 3 touchdowns. I was also looking at Aaron Jones props, but it's and we know A.J. Dillon is out. That guy has been out, was expected to be out from a couple of days ago. So I wasn't including him when I said everyone is active. We totally expected that. So Aaron Jones, big workload, but the numbers are pretty high on that. And you have to worry about game scripted. What if they do get down 14-0? Will Aaron Jones get the volume that he probably should?
In that case, would you, because this is inflated too, but would you look at a rushing and receiving total for Aaron Jones, which is like basically around that 100-yard mark?
It's definitely enticing, but that is such a huge number to hit. So I stayed away, but I definitely lean over.
There were questions, and we do want to move on to the gem and get to this next game, but there were questions about Tony Pollard and Rico Dowdle. Some people touting Rico Dowdle over 18.5 rushing yards. I actually don't hate that. And then, of course, Tony Pollard is 61.5, 63.5 rushing yards in some places. I don't know. I think I would be on the under with Pollard, and maybe I'd speculate on the over with Rico Dowdle. Mike, any thoughts on either of those two?
Yeah, I like Pollard. I think they're going to have some options to run on this Green Bay defense. I think the Green Bay is honestly going to encourage it as much as they possibly can. The issue is I know Dak wants to throw the ball. I know that Dallas still wants to throw. So I think they're going to continue to throw. I don't think there's enough for Pollard, as much as I like him, and I think he could have a massive day here. I would not bet his overs because of the way Dallas plays and because of how tight I think the game's going to be. But I don't think they will use them as much as they should, is what I'll say. I think they should be using them more than they will in this game.
And last thing, Mike, because there was a question on Aaron Jones here, and I know you're big on Aaron Jones today, at least to some degree. 16.5 rushing attempts. Now, recall, I hit Isaiah Pacheco yesterday over 15.5 rushing attempts. That was one of two that I hit. And I only bring that up because these number one options in the playoffs, like, they get worked. I mean, what did Pacheco end up with? 20, 21 carries, whatever it was. So I don't hate the 16.5 rushing attempts there, Mike. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, that's certainly an over or nothing. There's no shot on playing the under on it. You look at the last 3 weeks here, 63 carries in those games, 13 in basically the first game back against Tampa. Hit 20 earlier in the season, and keeping in mind some of those were with Dillon. So I think that because Aaron Jones is capable in the passing game in terms of catching and pass blocking, I don't see him coming off the field much here in this game. I think that there's some concern with some of the short area passes to guys like Reed that could take away those. But if you think that, how I would say this here is, if you think that they're going to cover the 7-point spread, play the over on it. If you think that if you're on Dallas covering the spread, I would probably just stay off. And there's no scenario in which I would be on the under.
All right, Larry, you had something.
Just to the point about Pacheco, because I was sweating Pacheco's combined rushing, receiving, and it was 26-7. There was 5 or 6 minutes to go. He did nothing as a receiver. And I thought, oh, God, CEH is going to come in and mop this up. And sure enough, they put Pacheco back in a spot where you would think they would give the backup, a few extra meaningless carries. But thankfully they didn't. So you're right. In the playoffs, they tend to ride these number one guys hard.
All right. And by the way, speaking of riding bets, we got Propstarz with the pick here. I believe this is from the prop show. Of course, that means it's probably on SportsLine as well. Jake Ferguson over 41.5 receiving yards at -114. Let me ask both of you real quick before we move on to our gems in this game. We obviously have talked a lot about the Packers in terms of props, and we adjust some of the Cowboys stuff with Pollard and Dowdle, but we really haven't talked about CeeDee Lamb. We know how sort of inflated his receiving yard total is. I think it's right around that 100 mark, if memory serves. But we've got like the guys like Brandon Cooks, Jake Ferguson here at 41.5 receiving yards. I mean, Dak should have a lot of success. And again, I don't think Tony Pollard's going to have a ton of success. So, Larry, I'm going to come right to you. Is there somebody on the Dallas side? It could even be Jalen Tolbert or Michael Gallup, whoever it is, that maybe you'd lean on an over or maybe an under.
Yeah, it's actually not any of those guys. It's Brandon Cooks. His number sitting around 39-40. His role has really increased down the stretch, has scored 2 of the last 3 games. But I'm not going under on Lamb, Ferguson, or any of those guys because I think the Cowboys are going to have a ton of success throwing the ball.
Yeah, Lamb he's at BetMGM. He's actually at 98.5 receiving yards, which is about as low as you're going to find it, but it's generally 98.5 almost everywhere. Mike, any thoughts on an over or an under for any of these receivers like Brandon Cooks or CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned 98.5, and I was wondering where you found first half lines for CeeDee Lamb here. Yeah, no, I'm not touching an under on CeeDee Lamb. No chance. Just absolutely no chance. It would be over or nothing. It's not even like getting cute fading it with Tyreek last night. It's Tyreek. It made sense to go under his number last night because of the elements and just the situation. Not the case here. So no interest in anything but an over on CeeDee Lamb's side. I like Ferguson. I actually kind of lean Ferguson over on receptions more than yardage. I know that's kind of an uncomfortable click for a lot of people just because you can obviously achieve yardage in essentially 2 plays. But I think he's going to continue to see the targets. I don't think he's had fewer than 6 targets since week 13. And I believe 5 of those he had 8 targets. I think Green Bay's going to do all they can to eliminate CeeDee Lamb. You really can't. And he's going to be able to put the football in his hands a lot of the time. But I think Ferguson's going to be the guy that ultimately, if this game gets competitive and they need a first down, they need some yardage, I think it's probably going to be Ferguson's direction. So I actually lean over Ferguson on the catches total.
All right, which is 4.5 receptions pretty much across the board. Before we get to the gems, Maestro, let's go.
Yeah, and David in the chat points out Cooks all the way up to 46.5. Yeah, he opened at 36.5. We have seen such inflation on these guys, especially as you get closer to kickoff, not playing him that way, but I will play him another way as I think we're going to get to.
Well, that's a professional tease if I've ever seen one, because now we got to get to our gems, our first touchdown scores. It looks like I get to go first with all those diamonds above my name. I'm going with Dontavian Wicks. I just think this is one of those guys where we don't really know it yet, but he might be a favorite red zone target for Jordan Love. He has been incredibly reliable when he's been healthy on the field. I understand, like Dallas, the way this game projects, Dallas, of course, projects to score first, but that's why we're seeing the longer odds on guys like Jordan Love, for example, or Dontavian Wicks, or really anybody on the Green Bay Packers side. So again, when they get down to the red zone, I understand Jaden Reed is probably the most obvious option. Aaron Jones, of course, who'd be sub 1,000. I think Dontavian Wicks at plus 2,500 is a pretty good find from a value standpoint, as much as you can have value in a first touchdown market, which, again, that's a different conversation. But I'll take Dontavian Wicks plus 2,500. All right. Well, Mike McClure, since you're also on a Green Bay Packer, let's hear you next.
Yeah, it's going to be Jordan Love for me. The price point, 4,800. This varies drastically across the market. You can find it as low as about 2,800 up to 4,800 here. But when you look at Jordan Love, he's someone that we know to be very athletic. We know that he's got a ton of weapons here that I think is going to be difficult to defend in the red zone. He's actually shown some rushing upside in terms of touchdown equity across the season. He's got 4 touchdowns. 2 of those 4 came, I believe, in week 16 and 17. And what's great about that is that was when they were playing for their playoff lives. You're absolutely playing for your life in this particular game as well. So I do not think the price point here maps to the skill set and his athleticism, keeping in mind this is roughly the same number that Joe Flacco had for the first touchdown with his mobility and everything there yesterday. So I do not think it maps to his skill set and the overall touchdown equity he does have.
That's a really good point. I mean, I can, and I don't know if you really referenced how it would happen, but you can really spread Dallas out with all of these receivers. You got to pay attention to all these guys. You could be on the 5-6 yard line on third down, and he could just kind of like waltz into the end zone. I mean, it's just one of those situations where I all of a sudden have respect not only for Jordan Love, but this entire passing attack. Now that we know all the receivers are healthy, it's not going to be an easy cover for the Dallas Cowboys unless they get immediate pressure on Jordan Love, which changes the game a little bit. But again, that's why I like the completions, because in Maestro referenced this in terms of sack rates. Like, he's going to get rid of the ball quick. And I think he's going to end up piling up completions because of that. All right, Larry, you referenced him. You referenced, I love this guy as a first touchdown scorer kind of in general, but go ahead and talk about him.
Yeah, and looking at the screen, if this were a fight, they would stop the fight. See, I mean, I think it's pretty clear what's happened here. So Mike and I got to get on the board. I think this would be a great spot for Brandon Cooks. And I didn't give him enough credit. He scored in 3 straight, 5 of 7, 6 of 9. And what I really like is he has 8 targets the past 2 weeks. So with all the attention CeeDee Lamb has to have, Brandon Cooks, I think when it's over 1,000, we're allowed to play it. So I'm going to go at plus 1,200.
Oh yeah, no, at plus 1,200. Listen, we go chalky all the time with plus 1,000, plus 1,100. So plus 1,200, perfectly acceptable. And by the way, in your defense, you and Mike, I mean, listen, I've pretty much been, not pretty much, I've been on every single primetime show. I have a lot of bites at the apple. So many bites at the apple. I've had like 10 apples, where you guys have had maybe bites at one singular apple. So everybody who might be new to the show, just know that I've had more chances at this, but still I'm breaking records here. Don't worry about it. What you do need to worry about is where you are going to make these bets. Oh, I have an idea. How about BetMGM? New BetMGM customers can sign up today and get $158 in bonus bets. Just place your first wager of at least $5 and you will receive $158 instantly in bonus bets, regardless of your wager's outcome, with bonus code EDGE158. That's EDGE158. All right, if you thought that was exciting, well, we have another maybe equally exciting game. Actually, I don't know. I want to ask you this question because the total is pretty much the same. It's actually a little higher over at BetMGM. It's 53. This one, for some reason, I think I'm more excited about, but I'll admit they're both kind of on the same level. I know it's such an unusual question, but Mike, I'm going to ask you first. Are you more excited about Rams Lions, or are you more excited about Packers Cowboys? Or is it a tie?
Rams Lions, but I'm excited about both of the games. I love any NFL game, Sia, especially when it's a playoff game. They all matter so much. But yeah, Rams Lions, by far the game of the week for me.
Maestro.
I'm excited for them both. Sia, I just want some competitive, high scoring playoff football. So I can't wait for both.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and give out my pick. And I'm glad as I look at the picks that are going to descend upon this show, and we have so many picks from this game, which came to you on the prop show. Hopefully you caught that, or hopefully you're a SportsLine member because you'd already have these picks. But us three are going to give out these picks, and then I'll give out all of the picks that we have. It's a lot on this game. I like the Rams +3. I'm going to keep it really simple. I think Detroit is good. I think they're going to be able to move the ball on offense. I think the running game is going to give the Rams a bit of a problem, which is why I'm not necessarily fixated on the over here, because I do think the Lions could possibly slow it down a little bit. There's 2 things that I think are worrisome about the Lions. One is I don't think Sam Laporta is going to be anywhere close to 100%. I'm speculating there. I'm not a doctor, obviously, but that hyperextension looked kind of severe last week. And honestly, I don't think he belongs on the field. And I think when you get to the red zone, that takes away a big weapon from the Detroit Lions. If he's not effective, I think it's a really big problem, because then you don't have a lot of reliable guys in the red zone. It's not going to be Brock Wright and maybe Amon St. Brown, but if you cover him, then you only have to worry about Josh Reynolds, Jameson Williams. I think that might lead to maybe a couple of extra field goals that could have been touchdowns in a game where you're going to require touchdowns. The other thing is this secondary for the Lions, they get CJ Gardner-Johnson back. I just don't think it's enough. When you have the Rams perfectly healthy, Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua, Demarcus Robinson, and there's that guy, Cooper Kupp, yeah, that's it, and Matt Stafford. This team is just too good, too dynamic on offense, and I just think getting 3 points is way too much. I'm not saying this should be a pick 'em necessarily, but at least it should be 2.5. You're going to give me the key number. I know it's a high-scoring game anyway, but you're going to give me the key number of +3. I'm going to take it every time in this situation, especially when I'm only having to pay -105 for it. So give me the Rams +3, and that actually segues really nicely, Mike McClure, into your official play. So
Yes.
up next, go ahead.
I just get a little excited about it. I like the Rams quite a bit this week. I have been across many shows at this point. This is probably show number 25, talking about the Rams this week. I played them at plus 145. You could still apply them to plus 140. You mentioned you're not going to say it should be a pick 'em. I will say it should be a pick 'em. I have the Rams favored by a point in this game. I think the Rams are the second best team in the NFC behind the 49ers, who obviously compete in their division. When you look at what the Rams have done, first of all, they've been top 5 in terms of offensive EPA. If you really look at the sample size when everyone's been available and healthy, I think they're top 2 or 3 across the league in total. Look at what they've done recently, though. 7 of their last 8 they've won, or 6 of 7 if you want to throw out the game that didn't really matter, in the final week. The only game they lost was on the road against the Baltimore Ravens, where they scored 31 points. They lost this game in overtime on a punt return touchdown, where it was a deep punt return touchdown. They were going to have them pinned deep. It's a fantastic spot. So what happens with Detroit? Detroit is not good defensively. They started out the season okay. It's slowly shown that they struggle giving up explosive plays. The best way to create explosive plays is to have an insanely balanced offensive attack. That is what the Rams have. Kyren Williams is phenomenal. And when you've got a healthy Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua and Demarcus Robinson, who can really change things here offensively, let this offense play in a dome. I just think they have too many weapons and they're too balanced that it's going to take a really strong and nearly perfect performance from Jared Goff and Dan Campbell. And I mentioned Dan Campbell because he's a guy that it's easy to root for him and to want his teams to win. He brings a new life, a lot of energy. And I'm about as pro math as you will find when it comes to making decisions, but he has proven multiple times that he will take it a step too far and actually make really poor mathematical decisions at times. I think that could cost him against a team like this, because I think the Rams can dominate a time of possession in this game, and I think they win it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, and I think I mentioned coaching when we went to when I gave the pick out on SportsLine earlier today that this is a pretty big mismatch. I mean, no matter what you think of Dan Campbell, I think we know Sean McVay to be, in my opinion, a top 5 coach in the league. And I don't think Dan Campbell is anywhere near that. And we've seen, just like Mike said, we've seen ample evidence of him being maybe too stubborn for his own good. Not only potentially, getting Sam Laporta hurt by leaving him on the field, and maybe other players, because he left those other skill players on the field even after that injury, including Khalif Raymond, who's not going to play in this game. But also, going for 2 points when they were set back to the 7-yard line, like decisions like that. You just can't do that. Okay. So Maestro, again, this segues pretty nicely. You've got 2 picks, just like the last game, and one of them sounds and looks pretty familiar.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Rams. I took them plus 3.5 on the Tuesday show. That hook could be important. If they're down 10 late and they come back and get the backdoor touchdown, that could be the difference. I agree with pretty much everything Mike said, and I'm on the Rams, but I will say the things that are giving me hesitation, because there are 2 sides to this game, and this is going to be the craziest atmosphere I think that we've seen in the playoffs. 30 years without a home playoff game. I mean, a night game. This is going to be electric. And even though the Rams are experienced and Matthew Stafford experienced, the rest of the roster is not fully experienced. So some guys could make some mistakes, could have some false starts. But I'm still on the Rams. And the other thing that could help the Lions is they do get Aleem McNeil, the defensive tackle, back. That matters in the middle of that line to stop Kyren Williams. And like you said, CJ Gardner-Johnson, the safety back. I still like the Rams because, like Mike said, when they're healthy, which they are, and they're rested, they have been the second best offense in football behind the 49ers. And Jared Goff has had a pretty fine season, but we've seen the turnover issues crop up. He's more of a system quarterback. It's not a knock on him, but that's who he is. And Matthew Stafford is a guy that makes big-time throws. And I will get to my second play, which is Matthew Stafford's longest pass over the number, because the Lions have given up the most explosive pass plays in the entire league. And he's gone over this number in 5 of his last 6 games. This is perfect conditions. So I just love Matthew Stafford. When you talk about Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua potentially getting loose because they do have to worry about Kyron Williams, that opens up those guys to get deep. So I love him to at least have one bomb. I also liked his over passing yards. But again, see, these numbers have been climbing all week. You're talking about what, high 270s now when you could have gotten it right at 269 or 268 when it opened.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lesson for everybody. I mean, this happens literally every week, maybe a little bit more so in the playoffs when everybody's focused on a smaller number of games. But it's such a good reason to be a member of SportsLine because people like Larry and Mike, sometimes I'll wait a couple of days and I'll be late to the number sometimes. And I'll say it in my write-up that I'm late to the number, but I still like it, things of that nature. But we have a lot of guys like the Maestro and like Mike McClure that are so disciplined and get RJ White in taking advantage of that number early, putting it out on SportsLine so that you can take it at the good number instead of what still might be a good number, but not nearly as good. Losing value, that matters over time in a pretty big way. By the way, speaking of numbers, I mean, we always have this 6-to-1 ratio. I'm looking at it right now. That's why I'm looking off screen. We got about 700 people watching and 126 likes. Like, what are we doing here, folks? You know the drill. Just go ahead and hit the like button if you can. I certainly would really appreciate it. By the way, Japan's in the chat, and he says, Donovan Peoples-Jones over 5.5 receiving yards. Interesting. Demarcus Robinson over 42.5 receiving yards. Kind of like that. David Montgomery, anytime touchdown, and Jamison Williams over 34.5 receiving yards. Looking to ladder all of them. When Japan says he wants to ladder something, we know this from last week, right? I'm not saying you should bet that. I'm just saying I'd pay attention to that. And if you actually like something, maybe go ahead and bet it. I think you both had something to say on that. So, Mike, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I was just going to call it the Donovan Peoples-Jones call out. I think is super sharp here. If you like the Rams side like we do, I think that this is neutral or trailing potentially for Detroit. They're banged up. No Khalif Raymond. Jamison Williams is an absolutely amazing talent. He has not shown the ability to play every snap, essentially, especially when he takes off on deep balls. He frequently comes off the field. So I think that Donovan Peoples-Jones is someone that if this game is competitive or they're trailing, he's going to run a lot more routes than people think because of the absence of Khalif Raymond and likely Sam Laporta, who I think has virtually no shot of playing the full game.
All right. By the way, Buster, I know you have something to say, but so I keep going back to Japan because he keeps putting numbers out there that are like crazy. He says Matthew Stafford first touchdown at what was it, 80-1? That would be amazing. Like just like the optics of that to go back to his home and be the first touchdown scorer in this first playoff game in however many decades. I mean, I feel like we all should probably put a buck on that just for the fun of it. Maestro, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I do want to listen to Japan or pay attention because, what he said about Shakir, it looked like he had read the box score, in advance. But Donovan Peoples-Jones, I believe, will be returning punts today. That's one thing to keep in mind without Khalif Raymond. But that plays into my Jamison Williams props, which is up on the site. I went over combined rushing receiving. He does get the ball sometimes. He scored on a 19-yard reverse. His role was starting to increase. He had the ankle injury. They held him out, which is what I really love. They held him out last week. He practiced in full every single day. And we talked about Sam Laporta. Nobody thinks he's going to be 100%. So if Amon-Ra St. Brown isn't getting, 20 targets today and Sam Laporta is getting, maybe a couple less targets, even let's say he makes it through the whole game, but he gets a couple less targets. Those targets have to go somewhere. I know there's Josh Reynolds, but Jamison Williams, so explosive. And a stat that I saw from one of the best analysts I know, Jennifer Piacenti on Sports Illustrated, is that since week 12, that the Rams outside, the receivers that run outside routes against the Rams have gone over 1,000 yards, the most in the NFL. So they have been weak defending those outside receivers. And Jamison Williams, we know he only needs one play.
Wow, very interesting. All right, Brian Sullivan has a question. And Mike, you and I talked about this on Fantasy Football Today, DFS. I know in your DFS lineups, you're particularly invested in a cheap value play by the name of Josh Reynolds. So Brian Sullivan asks, any thoughts on Reynolds? And by the way, it's a good question. If you weren't paying attention in the last few minutes, Khalif Raymond is out. Jamison Williams, we're not 100% sure how healthy he is, he or Sam Laporta for that matter. Josh Reynolds, anybody that interests you from a prop standpoint, Mike?
Yeah, I like Josh Reynolds quite a bit. I think he's going to be out there running routes all day, literally. And I think that if they get into that neutral or trailing game script that we keep talking about, that's where I think he's really going to succeed. He's actually a pretty big-bodied receiver as well, which gives him some touchdown equity. I know it sounds crazy to say that because he hasn't scored a ton of touchdowns. We saw him score 2 in the second week of the season against Seattle, 1 against Chicago, and I believe he had 1 other against Green Bay. When you look at this guy, though, he's 6'3", basically 200 pounds, pretty big receiver, and his ability to just simply stay on the field is what's going to be critical here. So I think he's going to be someone that gets not as much attention paid to him. You've got the deep threat with Jameson Williams, who's certainly going to draw some eyeballs. And then obviously Aman Brown. So I think Josh Reynolds is the guy that's going to run routes all over the field here. And I think he's going to be out there and is in line for a pretty big day. There's a couple ways to play it. The receiving number is modest enough that he can get there on 1 to 2 catches. So I don't mind it. I also don't mind his longest reception. You can find that around 16 yards as the longest reception, 16 and a half. Looking at his game logs quickly, we had 18, 13, 16, and then 21, 27. In those games where he's getting more targets and playing more, he's routinely in the mid to upper 20s in terms of a longest reception. So I think things are setting up nicely for him. My interest was mostly in DFS contests where you're required to play 3 wide receivers. But I certainly wouldn't be playing his unders in the prop market.
Gotcha. Okay. Is there a situation in the prop market where you'd be looking to live bet some of these receivers, some of them who are maybe not going to get touches early, and so that 29.5 to drop to like 22.5 pretty quick?
Definitely. Definitely keep an eye on Josh Reynolds, looking for his live receiving yardage over, even if he's got 0 catches, as long as you know he's on the field and playing. If they're tied or behind, that's where they're going to be involved. The other thing to keep in mind with some of that is he's someone who definitely would be involved in any sort of hurry up situation, into half kind of things. So look at that point. If it looks like they're going to get a final drive, whether it's 2 minutes, 30 seconds even, you might consider betting overs live prior to that, knowing that you still got an entire half of a game left to go.
All right. I love that. And by the way, we have a lot of other picks from the prop show. So let me go over those real quick. We'll put them up on a recap screen in a second. But EC's got 2 plays on Amon St. Brown. He's got Amon St. Brown over 89.5 receiving yards. That was at -115 when he gave it out. And Amon St. Brown anytime touchdown at +105. I really like that anytime touchdown one, even though that's not usually something I play. Dave Richards got Jared Goff over 33.5 pass attempts at -110. He's got Kyren Williams under 19.5 rushing attempts at -122. That's an interesting one, but 19.5 is a pretty high rushing total there for really any running back. So I do lean to the under there. Propstarz has David Montgomery over 55.5 rushing yards at -114. Larry and Mike, any of those that interest you in terms of like Amon St. Brown or Kyren Williams under 19.5 rushing attempts? Mike, let me go to you. That's really high. I mean, it's just, I know Kyren gets the ball a lot, and I know they're going to lean on their number 1 running back and they're not going to go anywhere else in terms of having a lot of touches for other running backs, but 19.5 seems too high to me, right?
If it were a regular season game, I would say yes. If you like the Lions to win, I would say yes. I have the Rams winning, so I'm not going to play it under. Much like we were talking about Aaron Jones in another game, I think these 2 guys are very similar today. I would be absolutely stunned if he had less than 25 total touches in this game. Mm-hmm. And the only way that he has less than 25 total touches, in my opinion, is if they're just gashing them on the ground, and that creates big play after big play through the air for the Rams, in which they're just winning the game. But even then, there's that correlation with being ahead. So as much as it is a huge number, you have to scroll pretty far to find a time when he had less than 20 carries. It was back in week 12 in a massive blowout at Arizona. Any game that's been remotely competitive like that, he's touching the football 20 plus times.
Fair enough. Okay. And Maestro, instead of giving you that question, I do want to ask you this, because there were questions about a potential officiating angle in this game. Do you have one in Rams Lions?
Yeah, we do. Our column is 35 and 21. That's me and Joe Gibbs from NFL Ref Stats. And our final play is on the Rams, in part because it's Craig Rolstad, which is not good news for home teams. They're 51 and 73 all time with him against the number. So he has definitely favored road teams. And one of the things he calls it a lot of is pass interference, second most defensive pass interference. And the Lions secondary accounts for a whopping 33% of their penalties. So we could see Kupp, Nakua, etc., drawing a key DPI flag. It's one call that can change these games, as we know. And it's just historically, he has not been great for home teams.
No, that's a really, really interesting angle. It makes me feel a little bit better about my Rams play for sure. All right. Well, speaking of Rams, let's go to the first touchdown scores because we have all Rams peppered here. You can tell where our allegiance is. I'll start with Cooper Kupp at plus 1,100. Listen, this is one of those where anytime Cooper Kupp is actually greater than plus 1,000, it's just one of those where, okay, I feel like I have to take it. I mean, it could be Cooper Kupp, could be Puka Nakua, could be Demarcus Robinson, could be Kyren Williams. But again, I'm getting Cooper Kupp at longer than plus 1,000. I'm going to go ahead and take that every time. No outside explanation needed there. But we've got longer odds, right? So Mike McClure, talk to us about a guy who's come up on this show several times already, Demarcus Robinson.
Yeah, Demarcus Robinson, what can you say? The guy's been phenomenal, and he's really helping out this team as being a legitimate deep ball threat and just a reliable target. It takes a lot of additional pressure off of guys like Kupp and Nakua. And a lot of it is also giving credit to Kyren Williams because he's the one who's really opened this up for it. But when you look at Demarcus Robinson, absolute deep threat. We've already talked about his receiving yards. I would attack him via the longest reception. You look at the last 5 games he's played, 37, 32, 23, 22, 30. You can find his longest reception in the market at 19.5 and 20.5. I think it's a pretty good look there if you like him, but I think he's going to have a deep ball shot early in this game. And if they are actually in the red zone, he's the guy that gets the least amount of detention because of how good his teammates are. There's someone else watching this game that wishes they had him back, and that would be Patrick Mahomes right now. He absolutely wishes he still had Demarcus Robinson. The rest of the league probably does not, because that offense would be scary if they had Robinson the way that he's playing right now.
Jared Moreau, very intrigued by what's being dubbed as the M2 and Maestro collab on Demarcus Robinson. And now I'm feeling like I'm sort of outside of the club. I feel like I now have to bet Demarcus Robinson because that argument was great. Larry, listen, I don't expect you to add too much to that argument, but any words on your first touchdown scorer who was also Demarcus Robinson?
Yeah, I mean, 4 touchdowns in the last 5 games, 10 targets last week, 10 targets twice in the past 4 games. And it just comes down to who are you worried about? You're worried about Cooper Kupp. You're worried about Puka Nakua. You're worried about Kyren Williams. So this guy does get some single coverage. And let's do it, Mikey. Let's break this Sia trend.
There we go. Taylor DeHart says, because I'm not watching golf right now, but by the way, golf's going to be going for the next 5-6 hours. I believe at least, maybe 3 to 4 hours actually. But JT Poston outright sweat activated. Okay, so I guess I got to pay attention to that. I feel like he's probably not going to win, but that was one of my 5 outrights, I think. Anyway, I had Ben Griffin up there at 100-1, but he fell back yesterday. All right, enough about golf. We'll be having golf picks on this show. Don't worry. My article's going to come back, and of course, the early wedge. But for now, let's take a look at Wildcard Sunday recap. I don't think I'm going to read all of these. You see the picks on the screen for both of these games. We got a lot of picks yesterday. We went 8-2 with at least one play pending. That was the teaser that involved the Dallas Cowboys from RJ White. But I'm really hoping for something similar to that because we got a lot of picks and we're all kind of on this. I shouldn't say we're all. A lot of us are on the same page, especially with that Rams game. That's going to be certainly a big game for the brand. Before we get out of here, though, Larry, I'd like to end it with we got these 2 games. They're both very exciting, 2 very different games tomorrow. But what are you looking forward to today? What's the thing that sticks out to you the most in terms of what you're going to be focused upon?
Well, I just can't wait for the atmosphere in Detroit. So happy for that franchise and Dan Campbell, but I do want to see the Rams take it. And I think the 49ers will be rooting for the Lions today. I think the Rams are the team that can give them the most problems. And if you remember that early game where they were playing the Niners and everybody thought it was a total mismatch, the game was very competitive until there was a pass that turned into a completion/interception for the 49ers. I think that's who Kyle Shanahan is worried about.
That's a really good angle. I 100% agree with that. I see Mike nodding his head as well. Mike, any thoughts on that or anything else you're kind of focused upon with this 2-game slate today?
Yeah, look, I think that in the NFC, nobody wants to play the Rams. I think that's pretty clear at this point. In the AFC, nobody really wants to play the Bills right now either. So I think those are the two storylines to watch in general. As far as the 49ers, they're rooting for the Packers here big time to potentially remove Dallas from this equation with that offense. And then they would get a matchup at home against the Packers and avoid the Rams entirely for another week. I think would be a fantastic thing. So I think 49ers definitely big Packers fans like I am this afternoon here, but I'm just looking forward to good games. Detroit will absolutely be rocking. We'll see if they're rocking at the end of the game or not.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see indeed. And by the way, Alex Jones says Rams to win the NFC is plus 2,000. Very interesting. I don't know, maybe worth a sprinkler. Sprinkler, I said. A sprinkle. Counselor, Kupp, Nakua, and St. Brown 50 yards in the first quarter plus 150. Yeah, I'm just not touching that. But it's at the very least interesting. Not quite as interesting as Matt Stafford scoring the first touchdown at 80-1. That one's a little bit compelling just from a storyline standpoint. All right. Speaking of storylines, we got 14 minutes until this game starts. So we got to get out of here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being in the chat. Thanks for hitting the like button. Thanks for being so active. I hope we answered all of your questions. I actually always shoot for all, but I know I missed some as I'm kind of doing the show here. But ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great show. We're going to do it tomorrow again at 3:30. We'll do it tomorrow, but also we'll have the early edge at 10 a.m. That's not just going to be a football show, right? That's your standard early edge show at 10. And then of course we'll cover the 2 games just like we did today at 3:30 tomorrow. On behalf of Mike McClure, on behalf of the maestro Larry Hartstein, and on behalf of Jake the Snake on the 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s, this is the early edge. I am the counselor, and we rest our case.